Welcome. This is David Laws, LSBF's lecturer in ACCA P3, the business analysis paper. We are working our way through EcoCar, which is a question off of the June 2011 exam. We're going through it in 10 easy stages to show you how to build up an answer, and we have now reached step number 7. In step number 7, we are going to look at the professional marks that are available. Usually in P3, these are going to be in question 1 in the compulsory question. So, there are usually going to be 4 professional marks. There might be 5, but there's usually 4. The key thing is that they're not really for any content. They're not really for anything technical. So to be honest, it would be possible, I think it would be difficult, but it would be possible to actually get 4 professional marks and nothing else at all, because your technical content is all just completely wrong. As I say, I think it'd be hard, but it is possible to do. So what do you do to make your report look more professional? Well, the first, I hope, obvious thing to do is, if the question says write a report, you make it look as though it's a report. You do the report format: to, from, date, subject. You'd be amazed at how many students don't do that. So to, from, date, subject. Your report ought to have an introduction. What is the report for? This report is going to analyse the external environment of EcoCar. That's what it's going to do. How are you going to do it? I am going to do this by looking at the macro environment using pestle analysis and the market environment using Porter's 5 forces. So what am I going to do? I'm going to look at the outside world. How am I going to do it? I'm going to use pestle and 5 forces. That would be a common way to start a real life report. Here's what I'm going to do, and this is the method that I'm going to use. All right, if you have said that you're going to use Porter's 5 forces and that you're going to use pestle, it makes sense to now have lots of paragraphs. Look at one thing at a time. I am just now, do that bit again. It makes sense to look at one bit at a time. I am now looking at political. I am now looking at social, and here's what I found. I'm now looking at legal, and here's what I found. I am now doing the power of suppliers. This is what was said in the text. This is why it's important. So do one bit at a time. What a lot of students do is they say, here's an example of political, here's an example of a new competitor, here's an example of social, here's an example of a substitute, here's an example of, and it's just all mixed up together. Keep it nice and straightforward. One thing in one paragraph. I'll do the political things, then the economic things, then the social things, and so on and so on and so on. If there is nothing in the case study about social, then don't put anything in your report. The worst thing you can do is say social. There was nothing in the text about this. Well, what have you done except waste time? So if there isn't anything there, don't bother writing about it. But use lots of paragraphs. Clarity. It needs to be clear what you are saying. Sometimes what we do in class is I will get a student to tell me what they've written, and the student will say, I have written, I've said blah, 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 or I will collect an answer and mark it, and the student has written blah, 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 and I mark it wrong. And I will say something like, I don't understand this. Or the student in class says something and say, I don't understand that. And the student then says, blah, 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 and they start explaining more. Well, the trouble is, you can't do that in the exam, because you don't know whether the marker understands it or not. So be as clear as you possibly can. Be as specific as you possibly can. This is what I mean. This is why I am saying it. One of the things that students often do in the exam is they simply repeat the question. So they would say, the population of Erewhon, that's the country that EcoCar's in, the population of Erewhon is well educated and it's a well-developed country. Fine, I now know that you can copy things out. What you need to do is do something with that information and tell me why it matters. So be clear why it matters. And finally, a conclusion, particularly if you're asked an opinion. State the financial reasons for and against something, state the non-financial reasons for and against something. I expect you at the end to say, overall, this is good, or overall, this is bad. I do not expect you to say, financial, it's good, on the other hand, it's bad. Non-financial, it's good, on the other hand, it's bad. And now I'm going to do part C. I need a conclusion from you. Give me an opinion. So, professional marks, report format, introduction, paragraphs and clarity, conclusion. That's where your 4 marks would come from. So, they're not technical. Is it clear what you mean? Remember, you can't explain yourself anymore to the marker because you're not physically going to be there. If I went straight to your conclusion, would it make sense? Lots of students doesn't. It actually is very difficult to work out what they're saying. So if I said, right, okay, I'm just going to turn straight to the conclusion, I think you should do this because it saves money, that makes sense. I might not agree with it, but it makes sense. I don't think you should do this because you can't afford it. That makes sense. So would your conclusion make sense if that was the only bit that the marker read? Don't worry, we will mark all of it, but if that was the only bit, would it make sense?